Your spouse is showing up at your work at 4:30 with some Trenta, latte or something. But if that's helpful, that's fantastic, and that
So
works.
now you know if your spouse shows up at work with a giant Starbucks, you know what the expectation is when you get home.
Aha! Okay.
You may be one choice away from a thriving marriage. Welcome to the Operation Thriving Marriage podcast with Brian and Jennifer Harvey.
Welcome back to the Operation Thriving Marriage podcast. We're happy to have you guys listening. Thank you so much for being part of this community.
And Brian and Jennifer Harvey here, and we are talking about something very important that we have gotten many messages about, which is talking to you about sex after kids. Now, one of my favorite movies from my childhood, this is 1985, the movie Clue, is the quote, "Life after death is as improbable as sex after marriage." And hopefully you've debunked that myth in your own marriage. However, what about that kind of a myth that's there as well? Is it possible to have sex after you have had children?
Well, so we know that sex is important for marriage. It strengthens the bond between the couple. That's part of the purpose of sex. It increases happiness of individuals and in the marriage. I mean, both, if you're having sex together, you are happier as a person, and in your marriage, you're happier in your marriage. It communicates love and affection in your marriage. It increases intimacy. Remember, sex and intimacy aren't the same thing, but they're related. And the more intimacy you have, the more frequent and better sex you will have. But also, that is a cyclic relationship that improves the intimacy. And, well, it feels good and it's fun.
That's right. So the problem that we have in dealing with this kind of question, said in many different ways, that we've received from listeners, is it's not a problem that the outcome of sex is, of course, kids, right?
Well, this is one of the outcomes as well. All those other things and children too.
That's right. But, again, they're positive kind of thing, even though they don't always do positive things. And I think we say kids are amazing. We have 2 kids. We love our kids. We think that they're fantastic. But as you guys have indicated, children can be horrible for your sex life. And everybody listening threw up hands and said amen, right?
Yeah. Well, they're always around. It's difficult, just to have some privacy. They live in the house and they are there all the time.
And they interrupt everything,
including the random TV show you're trying to watch in the night. They refuse to sleep. Mm-hmm. How many curtain calls?
Oh, sure. Just like there's some Broadway star coming downstairs for another curtain call, right?
Yeah, they just want all the applause.
That's right. And this is like terrible. And, this is probably going to be made a soundbite of my voice saying this, but that's okay. One article we read, seriously, this is not Jennifer Harvey saying this, is an article we read saying this, called them little sex leeches bleeding the life out of bedroom activities. But you get it, right?
It's difficult. Children is just to create that time and have those moments. And if you have children, you already know this.
Everybody listening says, preach.
Maintaining a healthy sex life after children are in the picture, it's just extremely difficult.
But of course, one of the commonly stated causes of divorce is lack of sex. So to protect your marriage, one of the things that you need to do is protect your sex life.
This is vitally important. That's why we opened this episode talking about how great sex is for marriage and what it does. It's not just that pleasant add-on. It's not just, get married and then you get to have this activity together as well. It's important for you to keep your marriage thriving.
And it's important to prioritize.
While it seems like maintaining a healthy sex life after kids is difficult, there are really some simple, positive ways to build those opportunities and to have a thriving sex life after you have kids. And one of them is, and we talked about this recently in another episode, plan a sex date.
Woohoo!
Drop the kids off at the grandparents for a while, get a babysitter and book a hotel room. take advantage of after-school activities that will keep them outside the house for a while. If they've got a late practice for a game or something like that, they're out of the house. Take advantage. Look at your calendar, look at your schedule, and plan a date for sex.
Another thing is enforcing the bedtime. And it's one of those things where routine is good for kids, right? So this isn't just for the parents and their experiences there.
Not just for our bedroom activities. It's good for them too.
That's right. Brian's like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But really, that is true. Kids are good for a routine. And as our kids got older, we told them that they didn't have to go to sleep, but they've got to be in their rooms. They've got to have that routine where they're kind of winding down, possibly finishing up homework. We talk about we don't want cell phones in the bedroom. That's another episode. But, just having that time for them to wind down. And for our future Broadway stars who are coming down for these numerous curtain calls, hey, Mom and Dad, I want to tell you this. Hey, Mom, I forgot to tell you that. And you're trying to watch a TV show or something, right? And you're interrupted during a 45-minute TV show like 5-6 times. I know you guys can hear that. Send these kids back to bed. Don't let these persistent curtain calls wear you down. Bedtimes mean sleeping in their bed, not yours. And again, we know this can be difficult, and we know a lot of families who have had significant difficulties with this kind of a thing, but hang in there, make a good plan to get this to be overcome. You guys may or may not have known this about me. When I was in college and law school, I was a children's entertainer. I like to emphasize children's entertainer, and I remember once when I was a costume character, I had a mom come up to me, give me some cash. I was like Winnie the Pooh or something, and said, you got to tell my kid to sleep in their bed. So I did, no problem. But of course, sometimes there are exceptions where kids can get sick. They're scared because they had a bad dream. You can't send them back to bed all the time, but most of the time you can.
Absolutely. I mean, bedtime is important for them, but bedtime is also important for you. Go to bed. You don't need to stay up late to prove you're an adult. You're an adult. You can go to bed whenever you want. There's that meme that's been out there for a while that I used to not be able to wait until I was adult so I could stay up past 9:30 and choose my own bedtime. And I learned, 9:30 is actually my bedtime. Go to bed. Don't stay up. And one of the things is just if by the time you're going to bed, you're so tired that the only thing you want to do is sleep, that's going to ruin your sex life. And if you have children, particularly if you have young children, you're already exhausted at the end of the day anyway. You don't need to extend that exhaustion when you're trying to build time to be together. You don't need to finish that episode of whatever it is you're watching. The great thing about streaming services is the show will be there tomorrow. Now if you don't have streaming services and you're watching live television, how important is that TV show and finding out who done it at the end versus strengthening your marriage? Focus on that. And also, you can go to bed for a little while, and if you're not ready to go to sleep after you've been in bed for a little while, you can come back out and finish your show.
All kinds of euphemisms right there. The other thing too, if you're having some trouble at the end of the day and you're tired, depending on what's going on, you have a cup of coffee around 4:00. That's another thing if you're feeling tired.
And plan for that. Don't just, it's like, I should have. It's like, no, okay, this evening, this is what I want to happen, and I'm going to caffeinate myself. I'm going to set the stage, as it were, if we're going to continue the Broadway metaphor, going to set the stage to make this an opportunity where we can have this experience.
Yeah, your spouse is showing up at your work at 4:30 with some Trenta, latte or something. But if that's helpful, that's fantastic, and that
so
works.
Now if your spouse shows up at work with a giant Starbucks, you know what the expectation is when you get home.
Aha! Okay. We talk about locked doors being sexy. Of
Locked
course,
doors are so sexy.
we don't want kids like busting in on anything, so it's important to lock your doors. If you don't have locks on your doors, not an expensive thing to get from the hardware store, and just go ahead and install yourself for that locked door.
Yeah, and let's okay, there's all of the tropes and stuff about kids marching in, they'll only do that once and all that stuff. And okay, but the reality is you're probably not going to be able to relax if you're constantly worried about the kid walking in. Even if you know if they're awake, that locked door doesn't mean that you're not going to be interrupted. That can still happen, but at least you have time to get yourself presentable to your children before you're talking to them.
Truth. Another thing that you can do is plan a lunch date at home when the kids are in school. If that is available for your schedule or a certain day of the week, that's kind of cool. If work would allow it, you can also make a long lunch break every now and again. Not sure how much food's going to be consumed, but there you go.
Yeah, just finding those times when your children naturally aren't there and use that. Take advantage of the time that you have.
So a lot of it, I think, is planning and scheduling that. Some people, and we've heard this about some celebrity pastors that would say, well, scheduling sex isn't sexy, and it's like, well, sometimes you got to schedule that so that it does happen. And if it's important to prioritize sex and intimacy in your marriage, as it very well should be, I think scheduling can be sexy, and it's going to be the most look forward to appointment and appointments on your calendar. So spontaneity, that's fantastic when that can happen. But if you got a schedule because of your life stage, please do. That's what we want for you.
Absolutely. And then also, so if you have younger kids, especially like infants, take advantage of when they're naturally sleeping. Sometimes it's
and
like
they do sleep a lot.
They sleep a lot. So it's like, okay, this is going to be, they're going to be asleep for this period of time. Let them sleep. And oftentimes, especially if you're a younger couple, first house, first apartment, or you've got a really itty bitty one and they're sleeping in the bassinet in your room and that feels awkward, there are other rooms in the house. Mm-hmm. Bedroom activities don't have to always happen in the bedroom. I mean, close the curtains, obviously.
Right.
But, you can do things, be creative with the time that you have.
Absolutely. And again, just the idea of, having babysitters, having grandparents help, having relatives help, friends help just with watching the kids. I've even seen friend groups where they're doing things where, kids are going over to one house on a Friday and the family's alternating just so that date nights can happen, not just sex nights. What was that friend group about if that was the case? But,
that was a great friend group taking care of the marriages in their friend group is what it was.
That's right. But just being able to connect, spend time together, engage in sex, it's a very positive kind of thing to do. So again, leaning on other people for childcare is a positive thing, and return the favor.
And planned sex is very sexy, but spontaneity is good too. Sometimes if it's just something's going to happen and the children are going out for ice cream or going to be out for a long enough time, then you know what? Sometimes those short, passionate experiences are absolutely, not just sometimes, those are just as important as the other experiences. So be opportunistic as well. Certainly plan and schedule things and prioritize it. But when you're planning and scheduling and prioritizing, you have the opportunity to be opportunistic as well. And you can find times like, we're going to steal this time that we have right now to be able to do this.
Which is pretty cool. So sex is an important part of marriage. You need to prioritize it. Children can make it difficult to keep the romance alive, but with effort, you can. Get creative, make it a priority, be spontaneous when you can be spontaneous, plan when you can plan. Thriving marriages include thriving sex lives.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Operation Thriving Marriage podcast. We are planning our next ministry season to live events. If you'd like to bring us out to your church, share this episode with your pastor and let them know that we are available for that as well. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Jen and I started Operation Thriving Marriage to help couples and churches take marriages from merely surviving to thriving. We've got our book, we've got a blog, and resources for our coaching ministry, and you can bring us out for an Operation Thriving Marriage experience. For more information, go to operationthrivingmarriage.com.